What's going on, everybody? Welcome in to the Sun Belt Syndicate, the basketball edition, the Round Ball Roundup, as always, brought to you by College Football Dogs, part of the Dogs Media Network. We're trying to keep expanding as we go along. We did a lot with football coverage. We continue to do a lot with football coverage as stuff continues to evolve. We see a lot of coaching changes within recent days, and still some player movement to be discussed and talked about. We'll have that big episode for you guys once TJ's back at 100% next week. So definitely be on the lookout for that as far as football is concerned. As far as basketball, that's what we're going to get into right now. We do want to tell you that we are presented by W Energy. You can see the promo code down below, SB Syndicate. So we've got that for you guys. They just came out with a sampler pack, less than $20, includes the shaker and 5 flavors, including Pineberry Splash, Dragonade, Beach and Peach, Galaxy Grenade, and Watermelonada. I knew I was going to tongue twist myself over that one. I guess it's a mix between kind of a lemonade and a watermelon. Sounds delicious. I've yet to try that one specifically. But definitely be sure to try out some W Energy. A little bit different. It's not a carbonated beverage. It's something you mix in yourself, as much or as little as you want. Obviously, there's a recommended dosage. But yeah, give it a shot. They've also got that liquid IV type thing. So if you have a little too much fun, you can definitely give that product a shot from them as well. Easy to find online by searching W.com or searching W Energy on Google machine to get you there and enter that promo code below to let them know that you came here from our show. We'd really appreciate that. So we want to get right into it, not waste any more time, and get into it's essentially like a little bit of a fancy slideshow, but definitely something to get you guys something to look at instead of just my ugly mug. So obviously, again, Round Ball Roundup as presented by us at Sunbelt Syndicate. And from time to time, we're definitely going to have some guests. If you want to be a guest, go ahead and reach out. We've got all the socials going on. You can probably be finding us. We are live right now on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, even LinkedIn. So yeah, I'm blasting it all over the place and sharing some Sunbelt basketball coverage because I don't think we get enough of it. And I like to stay current on what's going on. And so with that, we will get right into the happenings from this past week. So first, we'll go over some of the scores. Actually, we're going to go over a quick overview of what happened this past week. So Saturday, we had our only ranked team in James Madison go down on the road to Southern Miss. We'll talk about that one a little more specifically here in a minute. We also had Georgia Southern starting off 2-1 in the conference. And reminder, this was a team that was winless, completely winless before the conference play started up. So phenomenal job by them to turn it around and get going pretty hot once conference play started there on Saturday. To get to 2-1 on Saturday, they had already started conference play, obviously. Marshall and Troy both start the season 3-0 in conference after Saturday games. And the 2022 tournament champion and runner-up, that would be Louisiana and South Alabama, both start their seasons just 1-2. So a little surprising there. Probably more surprising on the Cajun side of things, as South Alabama did lose quite a bit. Obviously, Louisiana losing a few players as well. But Wednesday and Thursday, action picked back up. Marshall and Troy again continue to win and move to 4-0, easily on top of the conference with those 4-0 marks. App and JMU rebound from their kind of surprising losses. Certainly James Madison's loss being a little more surprising, but they both rebound with big time victories on Thursday. And then we had Georgia State storming back with a huge second half against ODU. ODU up pretty large at the break. Georgia State Panthers come storming back and actually end up winning that one. ULM, ODU, and Texas State all still remain winless in conference play so far. So we'll see if they can start to turn some things around as we go. And it looks like Preston's jumping into the comments. Appreciate you showing up, Preston. So JMU men and women go 2-0 again, huh? Well, JMU 1-1 on the week. But yeah, I guess if you're talking about just this past week, not the Saturday aspect, yes, they both won their games and are both sitting up pretty high towards the conference. We'll get into those conference standings as well. I told Preston he's got to get on the show with me at some point. Big James Madison fan, does a lot of writing for them, so check him out on Twitter as well. Getting into the scores, again, we're not going to go over every little detail the whole time here, but James Madison loses by 10 down there in Hattiesburg to the Southern Miss Golden Eagles. A hard-fought game as they went along down there. A good one to watch, just very similar to that Louisiana game. Pretty physical, pretty tough. Curbelo, I think, was the one who got bloodied from his head. So, yeah, this conference is not easy, as you can see, with James Madison and App State both having previously been undefeated in conference play and then both dropping one this past Saturday before rectifying that and both getting wins during the week. But Preston was saying the 2-0 was from yesterday. Yes. Yeah, I had a feeling that's what you said. I had already kind of said it out loud when I started rolling with that. And Yobi Cars, this guy's been showing up a little bit towards the end of our football coverage, and we appreciate him jumping in, saying what's up on the show. Big Cajun fan there. So give him a follow on Twitter as well. So, yeah, going back, James Madison, number 19, obviously not going to be ranked after that loss, being kind of a borderline top 25 team only because of the resume. The wins were fine. It's not like they were barely holding on to a bunch of those, but they just weren't the most powerful opponents. So when you drop at least one, with how the ACC and SEC and Big Ten are thought of in basketball, you're not staying up there long with one loss in a conference such as the Sun Belt right now. Unfortunately, again, hopefully that changes. That's what we're here to do. Provide some coverage, or provide some things and some reasons for people to care. That's what I'm trying to do. And I've been way more into Sun Belt basketball after last year, covering it so closely and continuing it on this year. It's not just football for me. I'm just a sports guy in general. I'm addicted to it live. And so hopefully get to do a lot of that moving forward as well. I called this one. I'll give myself a little credit here. Georgia Southern, again, continued their winning ways, got that 76-68 victory over ULM. In fact, for the week last week, went 4-3. Not a great record, but who would have predicted James Madison and App State both losing? I think you could have thrown App's name in there, of course, with Troy. They've always been kind of battling back and forth as far as the basketball court is concerned, and obviously with the football championship game as well. But yeah, the only one that was a little bit more surprising to me was South Alabama's loss, as you can see on the screen here. Not just that they lost, but how they lost. Georgia State really beat them up in that game, to be totally honest with you, wins that one 90-76. And then Arkansas State, I did predict them to take care of ODU, mainly because they put up that century mark in the game previous. So I knew coming off a hot streak, they probably weren't going to cool down just yet, and they didn't, beating ODU 90-75. And then we got Preston jumping back into the conference. Can't wait to play Louisiana in softball again. Expect us to get 3 to 5 bids this year. I see Preston's going to be my go-to for softball coverage. Baseball and softball are definitely not my forte as far as knowing ins and outs and by being able to really dissect the game. Preston is apparently that kind of guy for the softball coverage. So maybe we'll put something special together to have him on and talk about that. We are going to include some ladies coverage again today. We're going to focus on the men. I just watch more of it. So plain and simply, I can't cover both as well as I would be able to, having to try and focus on both. I'm just one person putting this all together at this point, but we wanted to give them some credit and some appreciation for what they're putting out on the court. Continuing with those scores, again, App State falling down in Troy to the Trojans 66-62. Pretty close game. App looked pretty decent in the beginning, but both teams really kind of sloppy, to be honest with you. Nothing tremendous from either team. App did look like they started to take control and then really fell apart, and Troy took advantage and wins that game. Marshall continued their streak, winning 79-75 over Texas State. I did question whether Marshall would be able to travel all the way down there to Texas State and win on the road after having early season success. They did do that. So full credit to them, because that's not an easy trip from West Virginia all the way down to Texas. They went on the road, did it against a team that's been pretty routinely up towards the top of the conference. Not so the case this year, at least so far. But Texas State has been a pretty good opponent in the past. So impressive victory for Marshall to go all the way down there and win that one. A game that most people probably expected. The Cajuns took care of Coastal Carolina 85-77. And Marshall, again, this is also including the games from this past week as well. Marshall on Wednesday night goes and beats Georgia Southern 79-74. Closer than suspected by many. Again, this Georgia Southern team is not to be fooled with as far as just thinking you can show up and beat them. They are rounding into form, and they are completely competitive. So there is no easy games. Again, you might look at the winless record outside of the conference and think maybe they got lucky. That's not the case here. They're playing everybody closer. They're playing everybody tougher. And Georgia Southern is not an easy out when it comes to basketball. And my editor, my lead editor-in-chief of collegefootballdogs.com, Troy has jumped in and asked me if I had a forte. Yeah, probably not. This is just my best attempt at it. Trying to do it solo without the help of TJ, who's definitely a big counterpart to the football coverage because we can play back and forth a little bit. I don't have such, at least at this time, as far as basketball is concerned. We're working on that. We're going to continue to work on that as we go along here. But again, going on with the scores, a couple more to get to. Cajuns take care of Troy. I'm sorry, Troy takes care of the Trojan. I'm just mixing it all up. There's a T, and they're both scoring 70 points. Troy takes care of the Cajuns 77-73. A great matchup. That was a really, really fun game to watch. Again, the physicalness is there, and the playing on the court is just fun to watch. Those two teams are both immensely talented. It was a really good, enjoyable one to catch there on ESPN+. James Madison, as we talked about, massive victory over South Alabama, 89-55. Not really any struggle in that one. Again, we talked about this comeback earlier. ODU pretty much in control at the half, and Georgia State comes storming back and actually ends up winning by 7 points, 77-70 in that one. Just falling apart there for ODU at the end, unfortunately. They looked very strong in that first half, looked like they were going to be in control and might even cruise to a victory themselves. Georgia State had other plans, and we'll get to some of the conference leaders so far and see why some of that may have occurred. App State also not struggling at all with Coastal Carolina, winning 70-45. So JMU and App, again, both dropping early games in the early part of the week or the tail end of last week, however you want to say that, with the Saturday games. But again, both rebounded very well during the midweek action. And Troy says Troy rules. So he would know best as a Troy himself. So I think that's a great addition to our coverage here as Troy continues to root for the Trojans as they go along here. And to wrap up the scores, two of the nightcaps from Thursday night, Southern Miss takes care of ULM 71-58. This one was actually pretty close there the first half, even through the early part of the second half, before Southern Miss really started to open it up there. ULM, again, playing at home in that one, so it was impressive for Southern Miss to go in there and get that victory as they played without Corbello as he sat on the bench and actually even went out on the court and cleaned up some of the sweat and possible water that was dropped out there at one point as well. So I thought that was kind of funny that he went out there and tried to help out with that. And then Arkansas State and Texas State, possibly the game of the week so far, as it's just a 3-point game at the end, very much in question. It looked actually like Arkansas State was going to win by a few points, 4 or 5 points, something like that. Texas State wouldn't go away, hits a late three to cut it to, I think it was a 2-point game. And then it was kind of just back and forth for that last 30 seconds. It was pretty fun to watch the end of that one. And Arkansas State is definitely a team to look out for as well. Before the season, I look kind of foolish now saying ODU is kind of my sleeper team as they go along. That's not looking like a good pick at this point. It may be Arkansas State. Arkansas State suffered quite a few injuries last season during basketball that really held them back from what their true potential probably could have been. They may be rounding into form this season, and so far it looks like they will continue to do that. As far as the standings go, let's take a look at that. Last week, I had the screen grab from the Sunbelt website, and unfortunately, especially for those of you watching from a phone right now, that was probably unable to be seen by anybody but me unless you zoomed in. So I've got a little bit better setup here for the standings this week. We got Preston jumping back in saying ODU 5 and 1, Texas State 4 and 2, ULM 6 and 1, Arkansas State 5 and 1, Southern Miss 6 and 1, Texas State 5 and 1, ULM 6 and 1, Arkansas State 5 and 1, Southern Miss 6 and 1, Texas State 5 and 1, ULM 6 and 1, Arkansas State 5 and 1, Southern Miss 6 and 1, Texas State 5 and 1, ULM 6 and 1, Arkansas State 5 and 1, Southern Miss 6 and 1, Texas State 5 and 1, ULM 6 and 1, Arkansas State 5 and 1, Southern Miss 6 and 1, Texas State 5 and 1, ULM 6 and 1, Arkansas State 5 and 1, Southern Miss 6 and 1, Texas State 5 and 1, ULM 6 and 1, Arkansas State 5 thought this would be easy. I know it sounds biased, but they take basketball very seriously. Yes, they definitely do. I know that James Madison and ODU have a little bitter hatred and rivalry going, and that's fun and awesome for this conference. They already played this year. Unfortunately, it was, well, I guess maybe fortunately, it was not considered a conference game. I guess it was just something that they scheduled to get another game in. James Madison won that first game easily against the two and would probably be heavily favored in both matchups after that. That's going to be coming on in conference play. But yeah, ODU's recruiting has been good, though. I expect them to probably rebound pretty well going into next season because I don't expect them to stay where they're at now. I think just kind of like Georgia Southern, they may get rolling late here. They unfortunately had the incident with their head coach over in Hawaii. I'm sure that's playing into some of this early season struggle as they go through, him recovering to full health and getting back with the team, and who was doing what while he was gone. And anyway, that it's probably a little bit more mental than it is just the physical side of things. Again, they could have won that game against Georgia State had they not fallen apart there towards the end. So they not maybe as far away as that 0-4 and 4-12 overall record are concerned so far, but we'll have to see. And he's saying both the men's and the women's as far as ODU is concerned. Yeah, I mean, off the top of my head, I can't think of where the women sit in the conference standings. But again, we got a graphic for that. We'll get to that towards the end of the show as well. But right here, they're dead last, unfortunately, for the Monarchs and their fans right now. But Preston's also saying never count them out. Norfolk State also does well in recruiting down there. Yeah, they're battling one of the better mid-major teams in Norfolk State. Norfolk State, probably not competing with them in many other sports, but basketball, they certainly do. And in fact, App State just a couple years ago, when they finally made the big dance during the COVID year, they actually matched up with Norfolk State in the first round and seed. And App fans had definitely seen what Norfolk State was capable of. They definitely had a lot of talent on the floor in Norfolk State, obviously, or maybe not obviously, but for those that didn't know, they ended up taking that first round. I think it was a play-in game. I don't believe it was part of the field of 64 at that time. But going back to the standings real quick, Troy and Marshall, again, 4-0, both starting off this season strong in conference play. Southern Miss, again, after this latest victory, gets to 3-1. Again, all teams all three of those teams, are 9 or more wins on the season. So looking pretty good overall. Especially with the better conference record, because we didn't do as a conference very good outside of the conference slate thus far this season. You'll see when we get to the women's side of things, they fared much better in the out-of-conference matchups than the men's side did and things. So that's unfortunate. And again, that's why you see a single loss to James Madison and they completely fall out of the top 25 poll. Other conferences and teams probably stay there even if they just have one loss because they're more of a power program or from a power conference. Unfortunately, that is not where we sit with Sunbelt basketball so far. A team that had been sitting towards the top of the conference for many years, but has fallen off recently is Georgia State. They have a 3-1 record in conference thus far, only 8-7 outside of it, They're 8-7 overall. So not a team probably a lot of people thought were going to be towards the top of the conference coming in, but that's where they sit so far. And again, these standings are technically not in the perfect order because, there's tiebreakers and everything. I just went by what was listed so far by the website. So really, this will sort itself out as we get deeper, and the records aren't all the same type of thing. But James Madison, 3-1, App State, 3-1, Arkansas State, all 3-1, but App State and JMU maybe at a different level with those better overall records, where Arkansas State has that 7-9 losing record. But again, we've seen teams get hot once conference play starts. Arkansas State appears to be one of those teams thus far. Let's see if they can continue it. Georgia Southern, very surprising 2-2 start. Doesn't sound great, but when you're winless before you get into the conference slate and then you end up winning your first 2 games in conference and you're sitting at 2-2, looking much more competitive and looking very much like a team that can play with the other teams in this conference, I don't think Eagles fans are going to be too disappointed thus far. Long season to go still, so there could be a lot of progress made before anybody throws them out and say they don't have a chance going forward. Yeah, and Preston saying maybe he knows more basketball than he lets on. Yeah, it sounds like it, Preston. We'll just have to have you on as a special guest very soon if that's the case. The Cajuns start at a disappointing 1-3, as well as South Alabama. We covered that a little bit. These are the two that matched up in the Sun Belt Championship game last season. Again, these aren't the regular season champs. The regular season champs are sitting over there at 3-1. That was Southern Miss. But as far as the conference tournament was concerned, the Cajuns and Jags matched up in that one, both 1-3 in the conference, both 8-8 overall. So struggles all around for both teams and programs thus far. We'll see if they can turn it around as some of the other teams that are kind of in the middle of the pack right now. As far as the teams towards the bottom, you've got Coastal Carolina with one conference win, 4-11 overall. All these teams kind of roughly in the same spot as the overall record, but we do have three teams that are completely winless in Texas State, ULM, and ODU, as we mentioned. So we will jump on after covering where everybody sits right now and go into the matchups for this Saturday. As we know, conference slate very heavy on the weekends. Saturdays, usually all seven matchups are going on. During the week, you've got a little bit of a split most times between like a Wednesday and Thursday set, but Saturday, usually everybody's going. And that is the case again this weekend with all games slated to be on ESPN+. This time around, we've got Texas State against ULM. Again, two kind of struggling teams just below them. Kind of a similar matchup. ODU versus Coastal Carolina. See which team can kind of get onto any kind of streak. Ragin' Cajuns go up against the Red Wolves. Very underrated matchup. Again, Cajuns 1-3, but I think much better than their record shows thus far because they've played some of the better teams thus far. Arkansas State, impressive. This will be one of their bigger, earlier tests in conference play. So we'll see what comes of that. Marshall and South Alabama. That one's later in the afternoon. I would expect Marshall to keep rolling here. I haven't seen enough out of their South Alabama to be on that rebound and turn it around just yet. So we'll have to see if they can do that. And probably, at least on paper, going into the weekend, probably the best one of the weekend, App State versus JMU in Harrisonburg, Virginia. This one is going to be one you want to watch. And also, I'll tell you this, the one behind it as well, Southern Miss versus Troy. Again, another underrated matchup, probably similar to that Cajun versus Red Wolves one. But these two teams are towards the top of the conference. So this one probably jumps that one and maybe is only behind App State and James Madison as far as teams and games you want to tune into this Saturday. Georgia Southern, Georgia State, doesn't matter what the records are, doesn't matter who's hot and who's not. These two teams don't like each other. It'll be interesting to see what translates on the basketball court. Usually the football matchups are pretty good, and you just never know who's going to win. Again, for football, it definitely doesn't matter the record. Let's see if the same holds true in basketball. Again, Georgia Southern struggling early, but kind of getting a little bit warmer. I wouldn't say hot necessarily. 2-2 is not anything that anyone's going to be happy with, but an improvement. And so it'll be interesting to see how they match up with the 3-1 Panthers. A little bit of a big game, if you will, especially down in that area of Georgia between those two programs. And Preston's saying he can't believe he's getting up for men's basketball between App State and JMU. What a time to be alive. Yeah, I'm glad this conference is so regional. It provides us some factor of caring, even if it's not, the biggest of games nationally, right? Like, I don't know who's matching up this weekend as far as college basketball. And to be honest with you, I don't care. That's the point I've gotten to with Sunbelt, is that this is my number one thing. This is what I watch. This is what I follow. This is what I cover. I don't really care if the ACC's top two teams are going at it. I'm probably not even turning it on. I might check the score afterward. I'm caring about these matchups because this is how we become a better basketball conference. It doesn't mean that just people watching is going to all of a sudden improve the product, but the more people that care, the more people that tune in online or go to the games live, that's another big aspect of this. The more players care, the more players see that, the more the recruiting becomes easier. It doesn't matter which school it is, because if you go on the road and you see crazy fans in the stands and the crowd going wild, you want to play in that atmosphere. I've heard it from players of all sports at all times. It's more fun when people are there and people care. So it doesn't matter if your team specifically is good. If you're playing against somebody who is good and brings it in the fan aspect, that's going to be a great recruiting tool regardless, because you're going to want to go on the road and enjoy that type of atmosphere and play in that type of atmosphere. And some players play better when they get a little trash talk to them. So again, not all of it's all bad. So we want to get into some of the leaders so far as conference play is concerned. Again, these don't include out-of-conference games. I'm focusing on our guys in conference thus far. And a surprise here at the top, at least for me until I clicked on it, I had no idea Tyron Moore from Georgia Southern would be the highest scoring player in the conference at this point at 21.5 points per game. Vashawn Alette from ODU, again, another surprise for me, and not a name that sticks out a lot. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that they're not up towards the top of the conference, but he's averaging 20.7 points per game. Isaiah Gaither from South Alabama, 19.3 points per game. He was definitely on this list towards the top last week. Doesn't drop very much, but he is still coming in third at this point, 4 games into the conference slate. Caleb Fields, definitely a name to remember from last season. He's still up here towards the top at 18.8 points per game. This is really the top 5 scores, but because there's a couple guys tied at 18.8, there are more than actual 5 guys shown here. Austin Crowley, I believe he was trying to correct everybody last year. It does look like Crowley, but I believe it's pronounced Crowley. If anybody's watching that's a Southern Miss fan and wants to let me know that for a fact, you can certainly let us know in the comments. But yeah, I believe he likes it to be pronounced Crowley. More of an A than an O there at that point. But again, 18.8 points per game. Again, just like Caleb Fields, a name we know very well from last season. He's continuing to get it done early on this season for the Golden Eagles. And Obinna Anochili-Killen. I love saying that last name, and I just try and I stumble more over the first name than his last name at this point because I've said his last name so many times. But he is also there at 18.8 points per game. A big reason why Marshall is starting to come on strong here in conference play because he was not really known last year. I think he's actually a transfer from a Conference USA school, if I'm not mistaken. So he's coming into this conference and has become pretty dominant pretty quickly. DeAndre Dominguez from Arkansas State sitting at 18 even points per game so far. Again, Arkansas State's got 2 guys up here at the top of the list. Easy to see why they're sitting at 3-1 early in the conference slate. Going on, we've got leaders as far as rebounds within the conference. Not a surprise here. Joe Charles was getting it done. Again, a name from last year. He continues to get it done again this year. 12.3 rebounds per game for him. Jaden Turner from Georgia State, 12 rebounds per game for him. So just below Joe Charles there. And TJ Bickerstaff, a name that we probably remember. I think we mentioned it. If not, he did win a Player of the Week award a week or so ago for James Madison. He's sitting at 11.8 rebounds per game. Thomas Howell, South Alabama. He's a South Alabama Jag. They lost one of their better rebounders from last season. So Thomas Howell steps up and becomes that guy now for them at 10.3 rebounds per game. But again, Jags' early season struggles continue. They'll have to see if his rebounding can go with some scoring on the other end of the court and hopefully get back up there. And Preston's yelling Dukes as TJ Bickerstaff makes an appearance on these leaderboards here, which is surprising. We'll talk about this in a second once we get towards the end of the leaders, but not as many App State, JMU players as I would think. And then there's one very obvious omission, not necessarily player, but a different aspect. We'll get to that in just a second. And as far as assists in the conference, we've got 6 up here towards the top. Again, Arkansas State putting 2 guys on this list. So maybe they don't have that only one big standout player, but they look to be spreading the ball around and sharing the wealth down there in Jonesboro, Arkansas. Caleb Fields leads with the assist of 8.3 per game. Andre Curbelo for Southern Miss, 5.8 assists per game. Jacob Connor for Marshall, 5 even per game so far. Again, Hanlogden was there in Marshall last year, and Kinney, I think it's Kinney that I'm thinking of, and Kerfman, who's still there. So they're finally putting the pieces together that I don't think were showing up as well or as much as they should have early in the season. but they're doing it now in conference play. And let's be honest, this is where it really matters. So all these non-conference games are really just big tune-up games for your conference slate. Do well in conference slate, position yourself well for the postseason, possibly get hot, go on a run. Again, just like South Alabama did. I think South Alabama, off the top of my head, was like the 5th or 6th seed going into the tournament last year, and I predicted them to get to the championship game. I actually predicted them to win the championship. They were a few points different from Louisiana there at the very end, but a great game overall there. So you never know what can happen with the conference slate. Position yourself as best you can before tournament time starts, and you may be able to go on a run and put something together. Tyron Todd from Arkansas State also on this list. He's that second Red Wolves player we talked about. He's averaging 4.3 assists per game. Dwan Odom, a standout from Georgia State last year, is on this list again this year at 4.0 assists per game as well. And Vashawn Alette, again, ODU's got a player in him. Unfortunately, they aren't giving him as much help elsewhere on the court as they need to in order to get onto that win column a little bit more, also averaging 4 assists per game. As far as the block leaders, we've got some of the guys who were up there in the top of the nation there for a little bit, including Justin Abson. As you can see in this picture here, he had the longer hair. That is now gone. So if you're tuning into an App State game and you're not an App State fan and you're looking for this guy, he's still big and tall. He doesn't stand out quite as much because he's gone all the way with the short cropped haircut, the buzz cut kind of thing, and getting rid of the dreads. So not as easy to see on the basketball court, but you will still notice him down there in the paint when you're trying to get a shot off, as he averages 2.5 blocks per game. Isaiah Nelson from Arkansas State, again, Red Wolves showing up all over these leaderboards, 2.3 blocks per game. Victor, I'm going to butcher this. I tried to pronounce it a couple times before we get started. And of course, as I'm reading the names as we go down, it's getting tougher and tougher. But Victor Ayukor. I'm gonna have to practice that one and get it to roll off the tongue like Ano Chili Killen, who's 2 players away here. But first is Joe Charles sitting at 2 blocks per game, grabbing rebounds and grabbing blocks, helping the Cajuns on the defensive end. Of course, they just have to translate that more onto the offensive end. Kobe Julian has been over there. Themis Folks has been over there. Those guys need to get on the board a little bit more, help out Joe Charles on that offensive end, and see what they can do to get into the win column again. And Ochili Killen for Marshall, 1.8 blocks per game. And RJ Blinkney from ODU at 1.8 blocks per game as well. So again, we've got some big guys down low, some power in this conference as far as the defensive side goes. And we just need to round into form on the offensive side for some of these teams. Speaking of the offensive side, we're going to roll into the leaders for the 3-point field goal percentage. Avery Felts, the best 3-point shooter in the conference thus far. Again, what a surprise. Red Wolves from Arkansas State. That's where he's sitting at, 16 of 28 from 3-point land so far this season. Good for a .571 percentage thus far. Up there towards the top of the nation, really, in 3-point percentage. So an impressive shooter there in Avery Felts down there in Jonesboro. Colston Benson in Texas State, 11 of 22, sitting at 500 there on the year for the Bobcats. Again, they just got to get more of that out of him, and maybe some other guys on the team heating up a little bit more because he's one of the better 3-point shooters in the league. Tyron Moore from Georgia Southern, again, he's showing on this game. He's been the leading scorer so far in conference play, and part of the reason for that is him being on this list at shooting the 3 pretty well. 14 of 28, again, 500 at this point. And Darian Ford from Arkansas State, 10 of 22 to round out the top 4. I didn't always go with top 4, top 5, top 6. It was just kind of where there was a good cutoff as far as the numbers were concerned, with, you know, a number of guys being real close in the same area, just kind of make it make sense a little bit as far as the graphics. I didn't want to have 8 guys up here when, you know, you had so many tied for the top, 5 or 6 dudes. So that is why some of these are a little bit different. Okay, this is the standings for the women. One real quick thing I want to touch on. Think back for just a second. If you're paying attention, which team is up towards the top of the conference that you didn't see a single player on any of those lists? Now, I'm not saying they're not right outside those guys that I had on there, but none of them are at the top of those lists, and that is the Troy Trojans, sitting at a 4-0 record. So interesting to see that just because you have these top players does not make you one of the best teams in the conference. Again, Arkansas State's making it look that way because they had a number of guys on this list and a couple guys that were, or a couple of lists that had two of their players. So it makes sense why they're towards the top with a 3-1 record. But Troy's 4-0, and they didn't put a single guy in any of these lists. Again, that doesn't mean they're 15 spots down. They may be 6 or right outside of what the guys I showed were. But still, just interesting to see that they don't have at least one guy high on one of those lists, but they are getting it done as a team. So that's vastly important thus far as we go through this. As far as the women's standings are concerned, we've got James Madison. Again, we just talked about that. Preston covered that earlier. I'll go up, put his comment back up again, yelling Dukes. As JMU has come in to the Sun Belt Conference ready to play, literally and figuratively, on courts, ball fields, diamonds, everything. They've done really well. They continue to do well, and a lot of that has to do with the credit to their women's program and their women's basketball program being a 4-0 overall record in conference and the 12-4 mark as well. Marshall up there with them. This is actually very similar to how the men's side of things started last year with James Madison and Marshall both up there towards the top, taking care of business in the basketball realm. Troy's men's teams at the top over there. Troy's women's teams towards the top over here on this side. 3-1, 6-8 overall record. Georgia Southern 3-1, but one of the best marks as far as overall record, sitting at 13-3 with some really good players over there on that side. We'll get to some of the top players as far as the women are concerned right after we take a look at the standings here. ULM women jumping up there, 2-2 mark, 10-5 overall. Arkansas State also 2-2 so far this season, 8-6 overall for the overall record. And so is Georgia State Panthers. App State 2-2 in conference, but 8-7. So just barely over 500 there. I think they were looking pretty good outside of conference play. And once they got into conference, things got a little tougher for them. See if they can rebound. And then a lot of teams sitting here towards the bottom with Texas State, Coastal Carolina, and Louisiana all sitting with 1-3 records thus far. But you've got to look at Texas State a little closer because you look at that 1-3 mark, and now you also look at their overall mark at 10-6. So I think that team much better than that 1-3 record indicates. They'll probably start to get rolling here at some point once this conference slate really gets rolling, and see if it'll be interesting to see if they stay down here towards the bottom. I have a feeling they'll start climbing up the rankings, not necessarily be at the top or anything, but definitely not as close to the bottom as they currently sit right now. There is a question mark on Coastal and Louisiana as they're sit at 7-10 and 5-8 overall. And then the teams with winless records thus far in conference play: Southern Miss 0-4, South Alabama 0-4, and both just 7 wins overall on the season. So it'll be interesting to see what kind of crazy things that we can have happen on the women's side. Again, it's a totally different game. You know, the men's side, a little more physical, and obviously a lot more stuff through the air as far as towards the basket with dunks and alley-oops. But the women's teams are definitely very talented. I've taken in a couple short spurts of some of the women's matchups. They've got some really good shooters, got some talented women out there playing on the court. And to cover that, we will talk about some of their top players here now. So Taryn Ward for Georgia Southern, to me, probably the most impressive player in the conference, not just because she's at the top of this list. If you actually watch her on the court, extremely noticeable when she has the ball, very impressive. She sits there at 26.5 points per game. Dominique Davis for Southern Miss sitting at 24.3 points per game. Izzy Higginbottom, one of the cooler names. A couple names here. Dominique Davis obviously is a great name. My full name is Dominic, so you can't hate on that. But Izzy Higginbottom is a pretty cool name there too. Like saying that one. Arkansas State player with the Red Wolves there. She's got 22.8 points per game. Faith Alston from App State Mountaineers. She's been a mainstay for the Mountaineers here. She's leading the team and up there with the conference leaders at 20.5 points per game herself. Daisha Bradford for ULM at 18.8. Also for the Warhawks. And Aaron Freeman from Coastal Carolina rounds out their top 6 scores thus far. 18.5 points per game for her. Again, keep an eye on some of the ladies, man. It's really better basketball than a lot of people give it credit for. I just took in a women's game at a local school here. I won't push who that was, but it's fun. It's a great time to go to these games and just have fun at a competition and just see what plays out, man, and get into it and have a little fun. My 5-year-old went with us and had a blast. So yeah, doesn't matter, men, women, good, bad. Just go take in a game, enjoy it, have fun with it, and see where it takes you. Preston is saying that softball this year will be coming back. Let's get some good out of conference wins. Yeah. Again, I'm going to lean towards you on that, Preston. I am not the softball connoisseur. I know that James Madison has a great program. I know Louisiana has a great program. Typically, when you've got pretty good baseball, you've also got pretty good softball. I think most of the time those things go hand in hand. So it'll be interesting to see if all those teams are still good. Again, this year, I know James Madison and Louisiana both expected to be good. App State made a pretty big jump last year. I think it was the first time they'd ever beaten Louisiana on the road there in softball. And I know the baseball team took a series against Louisiana down there, which is extremely rare for them to do. And obviously, if you're a Cajun fan, you know that's not easy, not something that they want to have happen, especially from a mountain school that has no business playing baseball. But again, we will be doing this same type of video aspect for baseball coverage as well. And maybe we'll throw in a little softball, as Preston has shown us that people really care about some softball in this conference. So thank you all for joining us. Thanks for the participation. It's a whole lot more fun when you guys throw stuff out there. Talk a little trash, man. Let's get into it. I don't mind stopping where I'm at when we're rolling along, talking about the stuff we are, and just talking with you guys as the fans, telling me what you see, what you hear. Are you frustrated? Are you happy? Whatever it is, let's get into it. Let's have fun with it. That's how we create people giving a crap about Sunbelt basketball. And so I hope we can continue doing this and having fun with it. And it just continues to get bigger and bigger as we go throughout the season. And with that, again, check out W Energy down below. Enter promo code SB Syndicate. No spaces needed. SB Syndicate. Try their sampler pack. Comes with a shaker bottle. It'll have everything you need except for the water. So that, excuse me. Speaking of water, I'm going to take a quick sip. That'll be everything that you need, again, except for the water to get going on that. Be sure to check out our brand, our stuff over at collegefootballdogs.com as we continue to provide football coverage, even though we're off the field at this point. And it's a never-ending cycle now. NIL, transfer portal, coaches fired and hired. Coaches will soon be traded in college football. And I think there's been some trades for coaches in the NFL. So I'm sure before long we'll see that in college football as well. So it'll be interesting to see all of that, have more fun with all of that. Be sure to check out our portal and high school signing show next week as we try and cover every single team in the Sun Belt. Maybe a little much. We'll try and do it in a roundabout form, but also get everything covered for you guys. Again, thanks for joining us tonight on the Round Ball Roundup, and we'll see you guys next week.